Hello, hello. I'm on a quest to solve inner city gun violence. I want to start off by sharing a story. This is Shamari. I met Shamari when he was about 15 or 16 years old. He's from where I'm from, the city of Chicago. And I met with him. I was a counselor. I'm a counselor by training, a practitioner. And I met with him because he was dealing with just some of the trauma within his community. He lost his brother due to gun violence. He had just had a daughter, and he wanted more. We worked together. I was able to get his application for college together, and he was really motivated to begin to do something where he can set an example for his daughter to change his current environment by stepping out and going to school. I also remember the day Shamari's mom called me and said that he was shot and killed by a disgruntled young man right while he was sitting in his car. Shamari is one of many young people that I've worked with that I've lost due to gun violence. And unfortunately, represent a statistic that is very concerning. The leading cause of death of black men in this country is homicide. And it's disproportionately higher as compared to anybody else in this country. Day in and day out, young men, particularly black young men, as young as 12 years old, are being killed and shot due to gun violence. And so as I think about this, one of the things that I've been challenged in my program is to think about what the literature says. And really just thinking about what are those risk factors that contribute to this challenge. And so as we think about the risk factors, one of the things I want to start off with is what they're exposed to. What are young people in our communities exposed to? If you're growing up in a community where you see yellow tape, you hear gunshots at night, communities where you witness somebody being a victim of gun violence, psychologically that does something to you, but you need to feel safe. And you say, hey, maybe I need to carry a gun myself. I got a 14-year-old that I was doing some counseling work with, and he told me, he said, Aaron, there are certain streets in Chicago I just can't walk down, because if I walk down that street, that's my life. He didn't say I'll get beat up or I'll get jumped. He said, that's my life. And he's lost friends and family members because of this. So if you're growing up in a community where you see violence, you can't get away from it. You also got to think about what's going on in the household. So adverse child experiences, some of you may have heard of it, but when we think about adverse child experiences, that's toxic stress within a household. So in a household where somebody's growing up with verbal abuse, a mother being abused, physical abuse, neglect, all those factors have psychological implications on the young person's development. I remember I was in a session, I had a 10-year-old came into my office. And when he came into my office, he had been dealing with ADHD, prescribed a wide range of medication. And as we're processing, he says to me, Aaron, I know why I act like this. He said, Aaron, I can't get the memory of when I saw my father strangle my mother out of my mind. He said, ever since I saw that, I felt so defenseless, I couldn't do anything about it. And so now I can't focus, I can't concentrate, I get mad real easily. ACEs. So because of the exposure that's in the household, then we got to talk about the exposure in the community. We begin to have these challenges, but now what happens is we have peer engagement. When we think about peers, the connection. I remember a client I had in 8th grade had been exposed to a substantial amount of ACEs, just like the young person I just shared with you. And I remember that he was impulsive. He was hyperactive. He couldn't focus in class. The school got frustrated. They couldn't do anything about it, so they just kind of suspend him. Eventually, he starts building relationships with peers who are having the same challenges. And so they're now out on the streets because they can't be in school because the school don't know what to deal with them. Not recognizing it's the trauma that's in their community, the trauma in the household that is creating this behavior. And so now we're in the streets. We got to be intentional understanding what's feeding the behavior too. Now, a lot of my critics give me a hard time, but the media has a substantial amount of impact on what feeds the young people and what they hear and then what they do. Now, I'm from Chicago, so Chicago is home of drill music. If you've never heard or familiar with drill music, it's a form of music where some would say, hey, it paints a picture of the reality within the communities, but also it enforces antisocial behaviors, the promotion of carrying guns, retaliation, and gangs. And now some will say, well, Aaron, music doesn't have an impact. But if you're somebody that's living in this community day in and day out, it reinforces that this is how life is supposed to be. Now, some people can listen to it and they're disconnected from it. It's a form of entertainment. But others, day in and day out, this is how life is supposed to be. And that is extremely, extremely dangerous. Now, I don't want to just kind of belabor with all the risks and the problems, because I also know that there is a solution to this. And I really believe that we can get closer to solving this problem. One of the things that I want you to think about in regards to the solution is family education. How do we educate or build the family up, strengthen the family? So, for example, one of my things that I've done is worked with young people who are in a family setting and working with a parent to understand how to provide different skills and steps to help. I had a young person who was about 15 when I met him, very angry, turn red, at mom, throw holes in the walls. But one of the things is that when we started working with the family and creating skill steps, he was able to manage those things and to be able to regulate it. But I think also, too, is we can be innovative and think about how do we use entertainment in a way to educate, to inspire families, to create creative thinking for our families as well. Another thing as well is thinking about how to use cognitive behavioral interventions in virtual reality with young people who are on probation for guns. So how cognitive behavioral therapy works, or cognitive behavioral interventions, I want you to imagine like this. You're driving down the street, and as you're driving down the street, somebody cuts you off. And when they cut you off, you begin to think, like, who they think they are? They got me messed up. Those are your thoughts. Your feelings may be you're angry, you're frustrated, you're mad, your heart is racing. And now you have to make a decision. Do you get that person a bird? Do you mean mug them? Or do you simply just drive off? That's how cognitive behavioral interventions work. It teaches how to understand your thoughts, how to understand your feelings and emotions, and then also how that comes into behavior. And what we do is we want to work with young people and teaching them skills so that if they're in a risky situation, how to recognize their thoughts, how to recognize their feelings. And now with the integration of virtual reality, we can create simulated environments. So imagine a young person who is dealing with things in the streets, and a friend may say, hey, let's go outside here, take my gun, there's the opposition down the street. Using VR, we can simulate that environment and then teach them how to use those CBI skills in virtual reality. Or a friend may say, hey, let's go steal a car. Again, we can simulate a real life situation in VR and then teach those skills for that young person to mitigate those behaviors so they don't be engaged in the criminal justice system again. I also think we have to think about a harm reduction approach to gun violence. Just bear with me. I know you may say, huh? These young people, they're not putting the guns down. You could tell somebody, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But guess what? It's going to make somebody continue to want to do it. But if you think about it, if you don't feel safe in your community, if you feel like the police are not going to respond, I'm from Chicago where if you call the police, it takes 30, 45 minutes for them to come. I mean, literally yesterday, our alarm went off in one of our houses on the far south side, and the police didn't show up for another 2 hours. So if you're a young person or anybody in these communities, if you feel like the police aren't going to protect you or going to do what they're supposed to do, you're going to do what you feel to feel safe. And sometimes that's what it is. And so I think we have to think about how do we create a harm reduction approach where we educate gun safety, how to do it correctly, and then begin to show, hey, also how do we address the trauma that's going on within the houses to mitigate the impulsiveness and the behaviors that's byproduct of it. And I think that's through a media campaign where we educate community about ACEs, about adverse child experiences, having billboards up on buses that creates light bulb moments for parents, for individuals, to say, hey, I didn't know when I do that in my household, that has an impact on my child. How do we create thousands and thousands of light bulb moments using art and billboards, or using media from commercials on TV or social media to help people just recognize that, hey, something that may have been passed down generationally, that you can break that, but oftentimes you don't know, but use media and the arts to do that. Ultimately, positive exposure. Like I said, I've served as a counselor for years, and I've had the opportunity to come into communities and work with young people who oftentimes haven't met anybody that's just positive, to come in and give them skills. In this picture right here, we have Shamari, we have Lee, and Eugene. All of these young men, ambitious, wanted more out of life. All these young men, desires for college. Stand up, great young people. All three of them were shot at. Shamari, the bullets hit him. Lee, the bullets hit him. Eugene, the bullets missed. This is Eugene today. Took him to Northern Illinois University, got him exposed to college. He graduated from the university, he's created his own company. He's an entrepreneur doing very well for himself. My whole point in saying this is that there is a solution to this problem. And one thing, if you can do this for me, the next time you're watching the news and you see a little black boy on TV, for whatever happened on the news, I don't want you to say what's wrong with him. I want you to say, what happened to him? Thank you.